Welcome to the Mom and podcast. We're your hosts, Suzanne Kearns
and Missy Stevens. We want to help you through everything that happens in the ellipses, from your professional life to your emotional health.
You're a mom and so much more. Let's figure out what comes next together.
Welcome to the Mom and podcast. I'm Missy Stevens. I'm a mom and writer, foster care advocate. And this week I am single-handedly keeping the delivery drivers in business with my reorganization, redecorating project.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I hope you're doing before and after pictures.
Some.
You know I'm a sucker for this. Oh, and I am Suzanne Kearns. I'm a mom and writer, LGBTQ advocate. And this week I am a pre-half marathon panicker because we've got a month to go and we are frozen out of training this week. And yeah, and
you need to find a treadmill somewhere.
I don't know. I think we might just do the Peloton and I don't know. Maybe if I stand up, it's like I'm. Like,
it is kind of. Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I need to figure it out.
Well, this week we are so excited. We have Doreen, Dodgen, Magee on the show. Doreen is a mom and author, psychologist, researcher, and speaker. Her new book, Restart: Designing a Healthy Post-Pandemic Life, has been featured on CNN, PBS, and in the Washington Post, Inside Higher Ed, and Well and Good. Her first book, Deviced: Balancing Life and Technology in a Digital Age, was awarded the 2018 Gold Medal for Psychology by the Nautilus Book Awards. Doreen's writing has appeared in the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, Psychology Today, and Health Magazine, as well as other popular press outlets. She offers various talks and workshops on numerous topics related to the impact of digital overuse on health. Doreen is a national spokesperson and senior survivor fellow with Everytown for Gun Safety. And she is also a lead consultant with the COVID Survivors for Change. Wow. Amazing. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Those things are just sort of ancillary. I'm mostly just a person.
Goodness. No, it's
a person doing a lot of good.
Yeah. Talk about making your ellipses count.
For sure.
And so, okay. So one of my favorite things about doing the podcast is just the total rabbit hole that we have for like when we start researching a guest and then it makes us think about another guest. Yep. And so I was actually looking up Olga Mecking's viral New York Times article that she did on Nixon that actually started her book Nixon. And y'all, if you want to learn more about that, Olga visited us back on episode 6. She was one of our very first guests.
Yes, she was.
But she had quoted you in the article. And so I was like, ooh, I want to learn more about her. And then as I just started digging more and more, I learned about, oh my gosh, your first book, Deviced. So that was kind of what was referred to in that article, and the fact that we need to do a little more nothing versus scrolling on our devices. But then learning about your new book that we're so excited as we're trying to relaunch and restart into this new, it's not even post-COVID world. I'm sure you had high hopes while you were writing the book that we would be more post-COVID. Eventually we'll be post-COVID. But I just want to know everything about you. Like, what'd you want to be when you were growing up? Like, where'd your career start? You know, what things have kind of progressed to get you where you are today?
Well, that's a great question. And that interview with Olga was a really high point for me. I remember it so well because her kids were running around as we were doing our interview, and I got to meet them and chat with them. It was just really beautiful. I grew up wanting to be a psychologist, although I had no idea in the world what that meant. I literally had no idea.
Yes.
I got in my head that I wanted to be a psychologist. I'd never met one. I didn't know anything about them. But mostly the thing mostly the thing I knew I wanted to do more than anything else was parent. And so I was very fortunate to get to do that. I know that is a privilege. And I found as on my way to both that working as a psychologist was a way that I could primarily parent, but also have a little bit of a foot in a professional world. So I walked across the stage for my PhD pregnant. And
oh my gosh, I love that.
and never worked more than about 10 or 12 hours the whole time that my kids were growing up, and only did that when my husband could be home and with them. So I feel very fortunate that I've been able to have this little bit of a professional presence while I was primarily, I really called myself an at-home parent. Because that's really mostly what I did. And then as my kids grew right around the time that my kids were in middle school. Flip phones were coming out, and I was beginning to see both the way that they interrupted the social exchange and the social interchange and the comfort with embodied social gatherings for kids. And I began watching that. And at the same time, I became an auntie and started to try to find my favorite toys from when my kids and I were little, and found that they were all chipped. They all had computer chips. Like, so the Fisher Price farm, you no longer say moo to the cow. You put the cow in a little thing and it makes a digital moo. And I started seeing like, whoa, wait a minute, this is going to interrupt now embodied play at both at first developmental stage and then again at this really important mid-childhood developmental stage. So I got super interested, and while they were still kind of growing and at home, started experimenting a lot as a family with the digital moderateness. And
oh, your kids must have loved that.
well, it was much easier for me because we were at the early end. I have so much empathy for parents. I say consistently, and I get challenged sometimes, but I will hold to it to my core that there's never been a harder time to parent, and there's never been a harder time to grow up than it is right now. And so as they launched, I began getting more loudmouthed because I couldn't get any of the toy companies to respond to me. So I decided, well, let's take this show on the road then, and started speaking more and ended up doing a lot of speaking at universities where I would just find myself, for 3 days immersed with tables full of young adults who were just talking to me about how hard it was to grow up and how hard it was to manage the digital versus embodied lives. And that's where the book came from. And then from there, it's kind of branched and launched into ways I never would have dreamed. And now I'm so thrilled to get to just be digging really much further into how our technology use helps us and hurts us. And again, then parlaying that into this, I think that as we do begin to reopen, I'm seeing it as this opportunity for kind of a do-over. For us as individuals, for us as families, to say, hey, what wasn't working? And how can we restart kind of with this beginner's mind? How can we think about ways that we can become healthier, both with our tech and away from our tech? And use this time as a way of setting new norms rather than just falling back into old habits.
Yeah, I think it's so important because there's probably some good habits that we've done as far as, maybe sitting down for more meals or having some more family time together, since those are the only people that you have the option to spend time with. But then there's also, some bad habits. So really curious of what you have seen around some of the good and the bad and kind of your general philosophy on habits.
Well, one of my favorite sayings that came out of me just in a surprise way, but has stuck, is that it's always easier to establish healthy norms than to break bad habits. So it's always easier to put normative behaviors in place that will lead us toward health than it is to try to break a habit that we fall into. It's not easy to establish healthy norms, but it's an easier path.
Or we'd all do it.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And I like to think about the fact that right now, at this particular time in history, we started running a marathon that we never signed up for and that we had done no training for. And we thought it was a sprint. So we're like, oh, we'll quarantine at home for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, we're in this marathon and then the other thing is it's got a constantly changing finish line, and it also requires that we have a lack of access to the types of rewards that are normally sustaining to us, social connection, engagement with the arts, or whatever it is,
or
that
dinner
we
out in a restaurant, for heaven's sake.
Yes. Right. And so we all we fell into habits that would preserve us, but we know from runners that we will injure ourselves if we don't start paying attention to the realities and the message indicators that both our minds and our emotions and our bodies give us. And so I really am encouraging folks to think about this as a time to do a couple of things. Work at breaking some of the habits that have not sustained us. And the only realistic way we can do that requires a few things. First of all, it requires buy-in. Us just saying we're going to break this habit, with no tie to any kind of reason why, it will never work. And getting buy-in from the people around us is really important. And then because we're still in this time, really thinking about breaking habits by kind of stepping down. So rather than just, I'm going to break this habit cold turkey, I'm going to step back. So instead of playing a violent video game for 3 hours, how would if I play it for 2.5 hours for a week? And then how would if I play it for 2 hours for a week?
Yes.
And then in addition to that, the thing that I think a lot of folks, when they think about habits and norms, don't talk about is that while you are stepping the habit behavior down, we also have to step up rewards, and we have to step up what I call kind of muses, the things that make us willing to step away from that habit without even really realizing we're doing it. So if we don't add these kind of beautiful yeses to our lives, it makes the habits, the things we're saying no to, much more powerful. And so the way that I think about doing that, and I write about this in the book, is by really thinking about what are my core values. And I have a couple of exercises that I encourage people to do, but use a values list and try to get it down to like 2 or 3, and then think about the exciting, sparkly, fight, I call them fiery parts of those values that could be muses. That so maybe my value is connection, and my habit is that I'm texting everybody all the time. And I realized to really have meaningful connection with at least 1 or 2 people, it would be worth the discomfort to hear their voices and to set aside time, and maybe even to do the awkward work of saying, I only have 5 minutes, but I'd really like to hear your voice. And that becomes then the muse and the norm. So the norm is every 5 texts that I send to Jennifer, I'm going to make 1 phone call, even if it's a 4-minute phone call to her or whatever it may be.
I love that.
So that's
I
the way
do
that I think
too.
about this.
You just mentioned core values, which is another one of our
Yes.
favorite things. We've talked about going through the list and narrowing down the list, and we've even looked at like looking at the major events throughout your life and seeing what was present or what was missing from those in order to determine like which one of your values was either being enhanced or squashed. So do you have anything kind of outside of those exercises that is your favorite values exercise?
Yeah, I wish that I could have gotten, I tried to find and just wasn't able to nail it down, but I have a colleague who does a values exercise where she actually writes the names of values on a deck of cards. And then they play like a card game where everybody in the family has to, you kind of have to barter, and each person ends
I
up with
like
their
it.
2 or 3. I'm like, what am I willing to give up in order to get that thing I really, really want? And I
Oh
think,
my gosh.
and that is a
I
really,
want that link
yeah,
or
I
I
will
want you
try
to
to
send it
find
to
it. Yes,
us
I will keep working
because
at finding it. It's a
yeah.
powerful exercise. The thing that I do, I talk a lot in my work about spotting points, and spotting points are we see them in particular relief with dancers, where they will on the stage they will pick a light at the back of
Oh,
the
yeah.
auditorium like an exit sign, and they will train their gaze to it. They spot to that light, so when they spin, they don't become dizzy, they don't get out of line in the
Mhm.
choreography. Snowboarders do this with chalk on the ground. Musicians do this with that inner ear microphone. It's that spotting point that keeps us on board. And so I oftentimes, if I'm like speaking at a retreat, I will bring a bunch of sticky notes, and I will have people write, all about, make their own sticky note deck of values cards and literally stick them around the room.
Yes.
And then start to look at 2 or 3 and see which one's like that. I'm never going to want to spot to that. That's never going to be my major one. Wealth, let's say, or whatever, that's an easy one to get rid of.
Uh,
Until you kind of narrowed it down to a few, and then to literally start sort of pretending like this is your life spotting point. So, you take one sticky note and you stick it on the window in front of where you do the dishes. and
Yeah.
and you start kind of imagining life through the lens of, if I was spotting toward that, what else would fall away?
Mm.
Or and just living with them for a while. I have one family who each family member picked a window, and they put all their sticky notes on the windows, and then they could kind of help each other narrow down based on what they knew about each other. And so that's just one exercise that I have used. It's proven really helpful.
oh, I
I
love
just love
those.
it so much. And I always joke
Did your
about,
tummy
not joke,
flip?
but my stomach just flips and tightens. And I know that's when I've heard something that spoke to me. And I want to go back to where my stomach first started flipping over. And when you talked about getting buy-in from the people around you, because I
Mm.
think one of the things I've done really well as a parent, my husband and I have done, is that our children have a lot of agency over themselves, and they know who they are in a lot of ways and will advocate for themselves, but they are still young. And so sometimes they're advocating for what they think is the right thing for them, but I I know that they're probably in that device too much. I'm really specifically thinking about devices right now. And something that happened to us in that COVID time when we were more locked down was we developed this habit as a family of eating dinner and watching a show. And it was something then that we could all talk about. And then we shared it, and it has led to family jokes. But we're really having a hard time undoing that. Not only do my children want to eat and watch a show, if we're not going to watch a show, because we've watched all of Netflix now, I feel like we're kind of out of TV. And if we're not going to do that, they want to sit at the table and read a book. I have one who's a huge reader, so I mean, you can't really fight with that, but he wants to read. I have another one who wants to watch his videos about Minecraft, and they fight me on family dinner, which used to be a no-brainer. We sat down at the table almost every night together, except for those nights where practices interfered with it. So I'm having trouble getting buy-in, I guess, is the short answer. The short part of that story is when I talk to them about family dinner, it is like I have said, I am going to feed you gruel and you have to eat it in silence. Like it's that miserable to them. And so I'm trying to figure out, do you have any tips or tricks for getting buy-in to go back, to reset and kind of step back to this place where we used to be?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind, and again, this is on the fly, but is how, is there any way that we can take this from thinking about, okay, we're going to talk about family dinner, which is already kind of seen as this like topic, if that's what it's become, into like, what if I start naming it, hey, y'all, I want to talk to you about family adventure time, or hey, I want to talk to you about family show and tell that we're going to start having at 5 o'clock at night. And oh, by the way, dinner is going to be happening too. But I'm inviting you, and maybe it's even something like, it looks like you leave them each a little invitation that's kind of magical at some level with, a Minecraft logo or something, and say, we're going to, meet us at the table at 5 o'clock. And I know we can't do this every day because we're exhausted and
Right.
way more things to do. But if we're working at the buy-in part, and then just saying like, we're going to cut this time together around this table, again, not calling it family dinner time, down to just like 25 minutes. And while we do it, everybody's going to bring something interesting to share. And I'm going to provide the theme, the board, you can look at the list on the board, and it's probably going to be a little challenging, and you're going to have to be extra sparkly and magic the first couple of nights. Like, but if there any way that, again, that we can make it about a yes, or we're all going to sit around the table for 20 minutes and I dare you to surprise me with what you wear.
Oh, that's cute.
I like that.
Although my son surprises me every night with what he wears.
He really does. I like the idea of this. If we reframe it back to moms, our podcast is heavily focused on moms. I selfishly asked a question for my family, but we're all in this like restarting phase right now. And I think even as grown adults who should know better, moms have probably fallen into some rough spots with not just how we parent, but how we work. I think about myself working from the couch a lot of days, which is part of the reason I'm redoing my office so that I want to go sit there, or the bed, which is a lovely place to work. I don't discount it, but it's not always right. So taking that idea into how do we as moms look at this restart into a world we don't really recognize? Have you seen some things that have worked for women? Have you seen some things that did not work? What are your thoughts there?
Such a good question. I think one of the things that, and this kind of parlays even back to what we were just talking about, but one of the biggest things that I am hearing as I talk to people and as I worked on the book was just the real disconnect from our bodies that has occurred. And especially for caretakers, they're thinking about everyone else first right now, and, thinking about how they can prepare their children or, whoever it is that they're caring for. And then there's this disconnect from their body, but at the same time, at the end of the day, they live in this bag of skin that does require some care. And without it, you're going to be facing the reality that you can't keep going. And I'm going to tie to a little bit of research just because I think it's so illustrative for caregivers in particular. But if you look at research out of like subarctic research centers or space centers, or even solitary confinement for incarcerated folks, you find that when people are in situations where they're isolated and they know that there's an end date, somewhere around the third quarter of that period of time, they face what researchers call the third quarter phenomenon, which includes things like agitation, reactivity, signs of kind of depression and anxiety, more anger than normal, and also this kind of physiological sense of kind of like, I just can't keep going. And I hear a lot of caregivers have those kinds of symptoms right now, and we're in a prolonged period of third quarter phenomenon with no known end in sight.
Yeah.
And the
Yes.
reason that I think that's so important is to be aware that our bodies and our minds and our hearts are giving us message indicators that we are ignoring at all times to attend to everybody else's message indicators, or the message indicators of these little things. We would never not pay attention to these
Yes.
message indicators.
Yes.
And so I think the first thing that has to happen, it goes back to you guys talking about core values, is creating whatever kind of realistic time and space there can be for a small period of assessment. And I am not kidding. During quarantine, I talked to moms or, caregivers or female identified folks a lot about finding whatever space that is, even if it's only for 10 minutes, even if it's only in the bathtub with blankets, because that's the only room in the house that you can lock the door on. you know, but taking this 10 minutes of time, and then it's hard because we're not used to doing it. So we get distracted and we kind of think we have to think about everything. But to use that time to go kind of inside and to do just a quick scan. I encourage people to kind of breathe in all of your attention and imagine it like a feather floating in the inside of your body from side to side, all the way down, paying attention to the thoughts that are kind of overwhelming right now, the feelings that are overwhelming, all of the places of tightness in your body, and to think about what are the few things I really need to care for this being that is caring for so many others. And I think about that as caregivers are kind of like sponges. And at the beginning of a day, or the beginning of a month, or the beginning of a pandemic, the sponges, has a lot of capacity. And so it goes to clean up all these different messes. Well, if it doesn't get squeezed out on mess 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 or 100, you put the sponge down and it makes a bigger mess. And
Oh, yeah.
caregivers are walking around as soap sponges right now. And so any way that we can begin to privilege realistic, small ways of squeezing out that sponge, and that's where I say 10 minutes a day of just literally deep breathing or boredom. That's where Olga and I love each other. This
Yes.
10 minutes a day of doing absolutely nothing. And I think especially as mothers, as caregivers, we keep putting that off. Oh, well, when I finish the laundry, I'll do that. Oh, when I
Mhm.
get that next thing done. Oh, when I get the lunches made. At some point, we have to privilege
Yes.
this small sacred moment.
You feel like you have to earn it sometimes, which is so bizarre.
Yes.
It's already been
Yes.
earned. You're human, so you've already got the doctor's note that says that this is required.
That's right. You are a doctor. You've given us the note. It's
I've given you the
official.
note.
It
It makes
is
me kind of want to
official.
cry to think about what collectively we're all these soaked sponges when you put it that way. And I look at who I was the beginning of the pandemic, and I was filled with this energy of like, it's not going to be that long and we're going to make it work and we're going to do these things. And I was going to help the kids study from home, and there was a whiteboard and a schedule, and I involved them in all of the decisions. And now I'm like, everyone, that's part of our dinner problem. Probably. I'm like, yes, grab your device. I'm going to grab my device. It's time for me to crush the candy and eat my salad and just everybody be quiet. Like, it's just fall into this place where I don't really recognize myself. I'm not me in a lot of ways. And listening to you talk about the reason a lot of moms may feel that way is just, it's devastating, really, what we're all going through.
Yeah.
It's really true. I think one of the things that can happen is when we are inspired. So when you caught that moment just now, and it made you feel like you're going to cry or whatever, it's a great moment to just say, okay, what can I do in the next 2 minutes to put together a tiny little basket that I can sit near the window in my house, that, every day I can force myself 5 minutes to just like, and all I do in that space is just remind myself why I'm doing what I'm doing. and take a few deep breaths. Or maybe I, listen to a meditation, and maybe I let my kids watch some egregious video thing that really distracts them so that I can do it. But literally, if we don't just start in the middle of this mess where we are, we won't. So
Mhm.
another big thing that I keep saying during this time in particular is good enough is both good and enough.
Ooh,
It's both.
getting that
And
tattoo. That's a tattoo right there.
Right.
I do have prints. I can send you all prints.
Oh.
I love that. That's so true. Oh, I think the thing, and Missy was kind of talking about the change that the pandemic has had. And I mean, your book does this beautifully. I mean, this idea of re-entering the world, restarting. And I think one of the things I have kind of lost along the way is a little bit of, I guess, maybe empathy, or
Mm,
I'm kind of pissed off at the people who I feel like are not helping right now. Like, and this is
yep.
my own judgment. Sorry, not sorry, listeners, if you feel the other way on this. But I mean, as far as I have a lot of friends who are either battling cancer or who are battling other issues or have really young kids who can't get vaccines. And it makes me so mad when I see people not willing to wear a mask because they feel like, well, I'm fine. And I'm like, well, that's great. But I have a friend who had a double lung transplant and she would really like to be able to, get out of her house. So I'm,
Yeah.
as you can tell, I got some issues. I don't have a lot of empathy for people right now, around vaccines or masks or whatever. And I feel like I am modeling that for my kids, and I don't necessarily think that's the best thing. So I don't know. I'm sure you're seeing this with some of your other clients, but like some best practices. I'm almost to the point where like I don't even know if I want to have empathy for them. I'm so mad at them. Like, how do
I
I
get
get
that.
past it? How do I get
Mhm.
past it?
That makes so much sense. There's a line from a Wendell Berry poem that has been helping me a lot in this time, and out of context it maybe doesn't make as much sense, but I'll try to make it make sense. He starts with, "You easy lovers and forgivers of mankind, stand back." And what he's saying is, people who are not willing to be uncomfortable for the sake of their community, stand
Hmm.
back.
Yes.
I will love you, but from a distance, and not
Yes.
because you deserve it. My love must be discriminate or fail to bear its weight. And I think one thing right now is that caregivers have an eye toward people who are vulnerable. And so
Mhm.
caregivers, mothers, are going to have an eye toward people who cannot right now because this pandemic is not slowing down, because we haven't hit the levels of vaccination that we need to for it to be safe for everyone. So your anger is righteous and your big feelings are normal
Oh,
and
good.
contextually make sense. And so I think the biggest thing that we can do is be able to own our big feelings. So rather than focusing on, it may be a reality that I just don't have empathy for these folks, rather than focusing on that in how you talk with your kids, talk about, I have a lot of anger about the fact that we are not being able to reach these levels that we can reach. And anger is right in some situations. Anger is not a negative bad emotion.
Mm.
It is an emotion that I'm feeling. And so I have to figure out how to do that. And if I'm going to say that I am also a person who is willing to love everyone, then I have to figure out a way to live with this anger and leave every encounter respecting the other person I've encountered and also myself.
Mhm.
Yes.
And that may
Yes.
mean that sometimes if an encounter is going sideways, I may need to say, like, wow, or ouch,
Yeah.
out, and walk away. Like
Yeah.
just saying, I need to register my anger, but I'm not gonna, in these moments of such a strong binary, people are trying to provoke other people at all the
Mhm.
time. And we know as moms, right, that the most effective natural consequence is to not give energy to someone who's trying to provoke us.
That's true.
Right?
That's so true. That's so true.
Like, you just ignore the tantrum and, hey, when you can talk to me in a kind, respectful voice, I'll be happy to engage. And that's what I mean by these moments of like ouch or wow, and literally then not giving it more energy.
Whew.
Yeah, nothing deflates a tantrum faster than you
And it's
you
the
go do you.
same,
That's
yep.
fine.
And it's the
And
same in social media spaces right now around, or
Mhm.
And
even
it's a
in
little
embodied
less
state.
snarky than bless your heart, which is the Texas version.
That's right. That's right. And
Although sometimes
it's
it's called for.
and it's respectful of self. It's like saying, you know what, I need to respect myself and you, and I'm now sometimes you may want to engage. And I think the other thing that's really important for our children to see us do is to that we can sort of in a moment pause. That's the most important thing. So when we feel that lack of empathy or that righteous anger, to pause and to make a conscious choice. What do I choose to do with this? Am I going to choose to engage? Am I going to choose to take a few deep breaths and walk away? And that's the most powerful thing. So helping our
Yeah.
children see, I've got these huge feelings and I'm going to model for you taking a pause.
Yeah.
And once I've taken a pause, in that pause, I'm going to make some hard decisions that you aren't going to be able to see in my head, but I want to tell you about them so you can know how to make them later. I'm going to decide if this is an important enough relationship for me to engage or not. I'm going to decide if this is an important enough issue for me to engage or not. I'm going to decide if I can kind of do this with a way that respects my own emotional well-being or not. And I think those kinds of things are powerful teachers for our children.
And again, that all ties back to that values exercise and that values
Yeah.
piece too. So it
Yeah.
all comes back to values. I think that should be the title of our podcast now because that's what we get every episode.
I do wonder if we should redo our tagline because we talk about it a lot.
We do.
I want to, if we have a minute of time, we've talked a lot about caregivers and the exhaustion caregivers are feeling and the lack of value placed on caregiving in the community. You've talked some about this. I would love to share with our listeners, what are some things that we can do to really advocate for change around this, whether it's policy change or just change in the way we ourselves view caregiving and taking care of those people?
Well, I absolutely advocate for people, if they have the capacity, to advocate for policy change and to just a simple thing that people can do is make a part of your scrolling and browsing be to just find out who your state rep and who your state senator are, and to take a look at what their stances on things like paid family leave are, and where they are on making sure that everyone has a living wage, and things where they stand on domestic violence, things, just acquaint yourself. And you can usually find this out just by typing in your zip code and who is my state rep, and then it goes to their website and you can just read their policies. And if you don't align with the way in which they're thinking about how they value the people who are taking care of the vulnerable people in their community, children, aging, individuals with disabilities, you can just write them a quick note. It doesn't need to be perfect and polished. The mom version of this note can just be, hey, I looked at your website. I don't, I'm confused as to why you aren't advocating for paid family leave. Why, could you tell me more? And that's going to require them to respond to you. So it doesn't need to be perfect. It just is, getting a conversation going. And then the second thing I would say is just it also has to be, again, at this personal level and with the family buy-in. And so helping, we unconsciously train the people in our family that we can go without over and over and over all the time. And I talk with this a lot of times with moms and say, like, what did your mom do to model self-care or not? And usually you can go like, oh, not so much, or oh, not in ways I would like, or and so to begin thinking about, what are we passively teaching our children in the way in which we relate to our friends, our partners, the way in which we relate to our own body, our own self, and then again to kind of try to find ways that everyone can support each other's caring for the self. One way I encourage families to do that is to, at one of those family adventure times, everybody has a piece of paper and a cool funky pen in front of their place, and to spend one dinner time making lists of 20 items for each person. They're going to be different, of things that really refresh or rejuvenate or enliven each person, and making sure that those lists are very diverse. So things that they can do in a moment, like take 3 deep breaths, to things that you have to prepare for, like go to a movie or go on a weekend trip, and then everybody can kind of, hey, I've really noticed that when you sit down with a word search, you like relax. So I think a word search should go on there, or, and everybody
Mhm.
kind of shares, and then to post those. And so, because part of the other things that caregivers face is they're making so many decisions in a day that by the time they get to that 5 or 10 minutes for themselves, decision fatigue has set in and they have
Oh,
no idea
yes.
what to do.
Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
if they
Yes.
have a place they can go and they're like, okay, I've got 10 minutes and I could probably really benefit from a 10-minute shower
Mhm.
or, or whatever it is, or a 10-minute phone call to that friend, or, and I'm setting the timer and I'm saying at the beginning of the call, I have to be off in 10 minutes, but I just want to do whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've gotten really great responses from that exercise.
It's so funny. So many of the really great tips that always strike me, I think, are the ones with the timer. that the
Yes.
other coaches have talked about too. And I think it is because we think everything has to be so big and it has to be a weekend getaway or something. And there's
Right.
so much that can happen in just a couple of minutes. Especially, going back to Nixon, it really is just a couple of minutes just sitting there. People get intimidated by meditation because they feel like they're doing it wrong, or you feel like you don't, have the right equipment or whatever. But literally just any place that you are, just sitting and staring off. I mean,
So
we can
yeah,
all do it. We can all do it, but it's
yes,
so uncomfortable. And I loved
it's
your quote
Yes.
about how it's like exercise, where it's like painful for a while, but then after a while, you're like, oh, this feels good to do
okay.
this. But we
Yeah.
just got to get past those first few times where it's like, this feels weird. I don't like it. This
Yeah.
is
So
uncomfortable.
the book I was pitching when COVID hit was called Welcome to My Boredom Party. And
Oh my
it
gosh,
was
I want to buy that book too.
it was all based on this idea of integrating small moments. And the reason that this came to me is because the research out of, well, let me back up. So in the first book, talking about technology, it has many beautiful benefits to it. And thank goodness we had it during this time.
Oh yeah.
And it comes with some
Right.
huge costs, right? And one of the costs that it appears to come with in all the correlational research and some causal research is that it redirects wiring, or it encourages firing in the regions of the brain that are not responsible for things like focus, the ability to delay, the ability to tolerate boredom, the ability to become still and become kind of internally focused. Those regions of the brain are not stimulated by this, which means that we do not create wiring in the regions of the brain.
Oh my
Because where the brain doesn't
gosh.
fire together, it doesn't wire
That's
together.
scary.
It's really scary. And it's also a huge cause for empathy, because we've created a world within which we are literally offering our kids the tools that prune off the regions of the brain related to focus. And we're frustrated with them when they can't focus. But it isn't just like a behavioral thing, it's literally neurological as well. So the cool thing is, so we know there's decreased wiring in that prefrontal cortex, which is kind of the responsible for the executive functioning that we have or don't have. But the research out of spirituality practices, out of yoga practices, really great hardcore research shows that 10 minutes a day of mindfulness meditation, of contemplative prayer, or rhythmic exercise, where it gets you into that sort of zone where you're kind of like in a meditative state almost. And I'm experimenting with 10 minutes a day of boredom, doing nothing deliciously, actually doubles the gray matter in the prefrontal cortex if done for consistently for 4 months, and doubles the myelinization. That means that
Doubles?
doubles. It means you can 10 minutes a day, and it means you can, you're increasing the efficiency of the brain and the power of the brain, because that's the gray matter and the myelinization. So why not, help our kids know this, that just this 10 minutes can improve everything you do. It will improve your ability to perform in the sport you perform in, or the art form that you pursue, or the writing that you do, or even the coding that you do, and the
Yeah.
relationships that you have. So we're going to practice as a family being bored. We're going to start with 3 minutes.
Yes.
You're going to feel like you're going to die.
So
we're going to get through it.
Since I am the nuts and bolts person, so we're talking about boredom and because there's probably several activities that my son would consider boring, but are still like, actually he loves
An
puzzles.
activity,
I can't use that but it's still not like truly boredom. You're talking like Nixon level staring out the window, right? Not any purposeful activity.
Yeah, correct. Eventually. But on the way to that, we can employ some tools to help us. The thing that I would say is, making sure that any fidgets or activities that you would engage in that time don't require any cognitive processing, probably even visual spatial. So it might be pipe cleaners. just a big, huge thing of pipe cleaners, because that doesn't require anything. You just bend them and twist them or do whatever you want. Or Play-Doh or kinetic sand, or a Hoberman sphere that just gets big and small, not a Rubik's Cube, not a number puzzle, not,
my God. My son has learned how to do a Rubik's Cube in under like 10 seconds. Now that's what COVID has done to him.
That's amazing.
I know, it's crazy.
It's just a pattern, right?
Right.
It's just a pattern. But I've been told
know.
that a million times and shown the pattern, and I'm still like, I don't know, I can't do it.
So yeah, we need to downgrade him. Go from the Rubik's Cube down to some sand. They love some kinetic sand. I love that.
And
I just found a bunch of pipe cleaners in my cleaning out and reorganizing.
There you go.
I know where my pipe cleaners are.
And you can even start with, we're going to go on to whatever meditation app we use, or I have some on my website. I've got some 3-minute meditations. We're going to do that together, and then we're going to have 1 minute of doing nothing, and you're going to end up, laughing. And I have invited people to boredom parties, and the thing that you do, we can't do them right now because of COVID, but you invite people, but you don't curate the list. Normally we curate a list for who's going to come together, right?
Yes.
You don't curate the list, and the agreed commitment that everybody comes is you can come with a creative idea or two, and you can even bring some things if you want, but you can't have an agenda, and no alcohol for the first hour.
Hour. I love it.
We're going to be together in the most awkward situation, and we're going to see what bubbles up. And I've had some of the coolest things bubble up in those moments.
So are you supposed to talk and stuff? Or
You come together and you're sort of like, well, now we've got this hour that we're sort of, and we're all together. I brought bottle caps, and I'm going to teach you, I can teach you all how to flip bottle caps. Anybody else bring it? Like whatever it is. But again, we're just so used to everything being programmed and everything being full and productive. And it doesn't help our need to rest, and it doesn't build in us the feeling of proficiency in being able to come to a moment with nothing planned,
right,
and have it be meaningful.
Oh, love it. And I cannot wait. I really hope that book ends up coming out in the world. And I love the idea. And we might have to have a mini party, Missy. We can do a boredom party on my porch.
Yeah.
6 feet away from each other.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So we know about your books. Or do you have your website? I want to make sure we get the URL out for people before we kick into our look, listen, learns here. So what's your website again?
DoreenDM.com. So DoreenDM.com. And the meditations are on the resources page, and there's a lot of videos, and there's also a COVID page that has a lot of resources for during COVID.
Good.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'll definitely link to those in the show notes. And do you have any, I know COVID is kind of ruining the seminars and that type of thing, but do you have any events or seminars or anything that we can help direct people to?
I think the biggest thing is just right now, the books. And
books.
my husband would tell you, if you need a really good sleep tool, the audio version of my book.
That's
nothing like the love of a spouse, right?
He means it in this beautiful way, like your voice just puts people to sleep, not the content, but I think it's a hilarious thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I have been having a horrible time falling asleep lately, but I don't want to fall asleep listening to the book because I want to learn from it.
I know. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Okay, y'all, you heard it here. It'll solve so many of your problems. Either one of them. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right.
So, okay, so I think we are ready for our look, listen, learn here, which is a time when we each share something that we've been watching, reading, or admiring, or listening to, or learning about. So, Doreen, we don't usually put our guest in the hot seat right away, just in case you need to gather some ideas. But Missy, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. I don't have a lot this week. I really did spend the majority of my free time and some not so free time, like culling through the things that had collected in our craft room. Well, it was a craft room for one part of its life. It's been our dining room. It's just the catch-all room. It's been different things. And it was my office once before, and now it's going to be my office again. So I spent a lot of time just going through stuff. And
I didn't hear from you for like 3 or 4 days.
Right.
I thought maybe we were in a fight.
No, I was in a fight with pipe cleaners and googly eyes and things that, like, I had boxes of stuff that when the kids were younger, they just, you always were collecting craft supplies, and My youngest doesn't really do it anymore, but art used to be his calm down tool. Like if he had a tough day or was overstimulated, he would even say, I'm just going to go draw, but he'd say it so mad. I'm just going to go make art. And so
I
we
love
just
it.
had a ton of paper and stuff. And, so I just cleaned through that and kind of made it a more grown up space. I'm in a space for myself. Haven't learned much other than how to do that.
You've
And,
learned how
but I
important
did.
it is to have that.
So important. And like to go through the mess and come out on the other side. And of course it's, if you give a mom a muffin because it's like, now I need to go do this and now I need to go do this and I'm going to move this to this room and this to that room. And so it's chaos, but the best chaos. So in my downtime, when I wasn't doing that or working, I've been watching Queer Eye, the new episodes that were filmed in Austin.
Yes.
And I just love that group of people so much. And the first episode of this new season is so emotional.
Oh, with Broken Spoke.
Yeah, Broken Spoke,
Oh.
which where I spent a lot of my high school Friday and Saturday nights at the Spoke. So it's a place that's near and dear to my heart. But then also it took place pre-pandemic. And then they had to shut down filming and come back after the pandemic. And anytime I watch anything that bumps up against that time, it just brings up all this emotion of what we didn't know then. And you're watching it and you're like, I didn't know it. I know it looking at them now. I know what they don't know yet. And it was a very emotional episode to watch.
Yeah.
Beyond the normal emotion that comes with a Queer Eye episode, because they're always so just lovely with whoever they're making over and helping. They're just,
they're
warm,
so sweet. They have such a
people.
fun energy.
Yes.
But I got that out of I told you I was watching The Amazing Race. We finally got to the episode where they had to shut it down.
Yeah.
And then they showed the preview of what is going to be the next episode, which is when, some of the people come back, not all of them. I don't know the story behind why some and some couldn't. I had to get up and leave. I don't even know what it was. Just this, when he was doing the talk and being like, we don't know what's going to happen. We're going to send you home for your safety, but hopefully we'll regroup soon. And I was just like, no, you're not. It's just like, you feel like you're seeing this future. And I had to get up because I was like, okay, I don't want to start bawling in front of the kids and them being like, what? But just The Amazing Race got to me. So
right.
It's not so much push me over.
Right. It's not so much The Amazing Race. It's not so much Queer Eye. It's just that feeling of, they started filming that in February, March of 2020.
Yeah. They didn't know. And we still don't know.
We still don't freaking know. I think that is part of it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So, yeah, that is emotional.
Beyond that emotional gut punch, I do highly recommend it if you're not watching it. So much fun. And beyond that part.
Yeah.
So that's it for me this week.
All right. What about you, Doreen?
Well, that's interesting because I was going to say that I am looking out my window a lot. and I mean that really, I'm really trying to privilege. Sometimes I'm looking at my window, but
yeah,
when you brought that up, Missy, I have this weird relationship with Queer Eye where I need it. I need to know that there are episodes out there that I haven't seen so that if my life completely falls apart, I know that I can
you have it.
And I was very fortunate and got to be on Jonathan's podcast, Getting Curious, before the pandemic.
Right.
And
he blurbed your book.
Yeah, he did blurb my book. Yes. Yeah. But I told him I have to ration it, because and then he kind of got on me because that hurts their numbers if people aren't watching it binge.
No, I need to binge it.
Their numbers are good. People are watching.
But I have had a lovely thing happen where I found another show that I love almost as much that I can now keep rationing both and have a longer time to have something out there. And it's We're Here on HBO Max.
Oh,
I cannot recommend it highly enough. I am a person who I have 2 kids who came out of my body, and then I have one other kid that married one of the kids that came out of my body. But then I have a lot of extra kids who are really, genuinely extra kids. They're with us on holidays. I love them like my own. And this We're Here is basically a show where 3 drag queens go into really conservative cities in the US and make over an individual who has had a hard time living in that city. And then they have a drag show at the end of this episode. And
Oh,
it for
I just got
me,
so many goosebumps.
oh,
To me
it for
too.
me,
I
it's like
did.
I have found the people who see family like I do.
Oh,
And I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is an incredible, incredible show.
okay. Adding that to the list. That's amazing.
And I think I'm reading a book called The Whole Language by Gregory Boyle, who is the founder of Homeboy Industries, and I
Yes.
think it should be required reading
them.
for everyone. And I'm learning. I became a plant person during the pandemic. I could not
Ooh.
keep plants alive to save my life before.
Missy can help you. She's certified.
Yay! Well,
At post-pandemic, I became a master gardener because of my obsession grew so much in the pandemic.
Okay. Well, so yeah, this winter I'm learning about how to winter plants, which is teaching me a lot about how to winter myself.
Ooh.
And there's a lot of learning there about like, okay, I don't need as much of this thing that I do when I'm super, super active, and I need more of this thing. And it's being a really important teacher to me right now. So
I
those are my
love
things.
that.
I need that because I left all my plants outside again last night.
Just pull them in today. Last night they were probably fine. Pull them in today.
That is a self-care lesson. Even I would not leave myself out in the 20-degree weather. But no, that's such an interesting point as far as like applying some of the rules of nature and getting back to before we had all these other things, the modern society things that we roll into our lives, and just kind of listening to the natural flow of that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And we aren't static. We don't always need the same thing. I love that way of looking at it. Like your plants don't need food as much in a non-growing season. They don't need water as much in the winter.
In fact, you can kill them if you give them that.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I have in the past many a time. And like really,
I feel like you see the Nutella bottle on my counter.
Yeah. Paying attention to our own needs the way we pay attention to our plants' needs is just, oh, that's so lovely. I love that you said that.
Except for that I'm so with my plants.
Well, I am with my plants at times and with myself. So it is a great lesson.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay. So what about
you?
What have I been looking at? I have been looking at, oh my gosh, Righteous Gemstones. Have you heard of this?
I've never watched it. It's
on
my list.
I started it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So John Goodman is the head of this like world famous televangelist mega church family. And his kids have just like every dysfunction that you can possibly imagine. They are a mess. It's super hilarious, but it also has a little dark. Like the first episode, like there's some vehicular, not manslaughter, but there's some vans rolling over people, but it's just, it's exactly what we need right now, especially because the other show that we are watching is Station 11, which I read way back before the pandemic. And the first few episodes, my husband and I were like, this is a little too close to home as far as,
I don't know if we can do that right now.
But yeah, so it's balancing that out with the Righteous Gemstones, because the big news of the week is that I finished The Sopranos. It only took me, 20 years? I finally finished The Sopranos.
Are you bereft?
I'm fine. I'm good with it. I'm good with it because, I knew it was coming. I've had a few shows. We watched 6 Feet Under. I watched the series finale. This was 10 years ago, not knowing that it was the finale. And I was just like, and it ended, and I was like, wait, like there should have been a warning at the beginning. So I knew that it was the end, and I knew that people had like this, very love it, hate it reaction to this. I knew that something was going to happen that was either going to, and I was fine with it. So that's good. But it's just nice. It's nice to have that wrapped up. Felt like something that's been hanging over my head since Zoe was born.
2-decade project.
Let's see. And then I've been listening to Jill Smokeler, who is our guest, actually the podcast that released today when we're recording this. So by the time this airs, it'll be like 2 weeks ago. But so Jill Smokeler was the founder of Scary Mommy. She sold that off and spent 2.5 years recovering from the just identity crisis of having, I mean, that was basically selling off herself. I mean, it was a big, it's a big deal.
Right.
But in the meantime, she had also started this podcast called Generation X, which she'd gone through a divorce and, leaving her company, a lot of big changes. this podcast, and she mentioned it on our episode, was, I mean, she goes there. She and her friend,
Yeah.
they're talking about dating in your 50s, and just even like a glossary of terms of the stuff that like these
We
guys
don't
will
know
say that they're
because
into, and they don't even know what it means. They're like, I don't know what pegging is. I don't know what
I
this
don't.
is. I don't know.
I'm gonna Google
They
that in a
had to
minute in a
explain
private
what it
window.
was. They're just, and it's so, yeah, she said she went there, and that is not, she is doing a new podcast now called She's Got Issues, which may or may not come out next month. She's kind of
Yeah. She's
it's
working
going to
on
start
some
when it
things.
starts. Yeah. But there's like 10 episodes of this old podcast. So while you're waiting for her new podcast to start, you can listen to. And oh my God, I don't know. It might be one of those things where my husband just puts it on my rotation to make me appreciate him more. Like that I don't have to go do this.
I don't know if I could ever do it. I don't know if I could date again. I hope I never
Yes.
have to find out, but I am not
Yeah.
sure that I am cut out for today's modern dating.
Apparently not, because I don't know what pegging is. And now that I
Either.
do know what it is, I'm just
you learned on the podcast?
Yes.
I'm going to have to listen to the podcast. Maybe
I'm
that's better
like,
than Googling. I don't know.
I got enough stuff in my closet to organize. I don't need like all this new equipment. But anyway. No, I'm not judging. I'm not shaming. I told you we were watching that great Gwyneth Paltrow. Oh, what's it called?
Oh,
it was another Look, Listen, Learn.
Sex and Goop.
Sex and Goop or whatever. And like everybody has their kinks. That was one of the things that came out of that. And you may not think of it as a kink because you're like, oh, it's just a nice thing that I like. I like to, you know, have warm socks on while I do it. I don't know. I just pull stuff out of nowhere.
Apparently that's supposed to be really good for men to keep their socks on.
Oh, really?
This is not a sex podcast, but just in case.
Anyway, so I am not judging anybody on their pegging or their kinks or whatever it may be, because I think we all have one and we just don't realize that it has a name for it.
Right.
But yeah, it's just, again, a whole glossary of terms and vocabulary that I was just like, what? Look, I need to pause every 5 minutes and be like, what are you talking about? But yeah, so for any women who are going through a divorce or dating or whatever the case may be, I don't even think it's just midlife. It's anybody at any age.
Right.
They give it from a midlife point of view, but I
just like dating now. If you're dating now for any reason,
now.
it's a very different
Yeah.
situation.
And if you're dating in an online dating space, just
Yes.
like hear my voice right now saying you are brilliant and you are beautiful, and try as much as you can to let that stuff slough off of you, because it's a painful place to be.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that her new podcast is going to address a lot of those things too. The reason they paused it was not because they had solved the problem of online and midlife dating. It was because they were like, it was all about sex and dating. And they're like, we're not having sex or dating right now because of the pandemic. Right. So they paused it, which I argued that is when people probably needed that podcast most, is because they're still working through those, the issues, or just feeling like they're either lonely or the companionship. So yes, but I'm very happy to know that she has a new one coming up, because she's got such a fun voice. I mean, she brought it to Scary Mommy, and she's bringing it now to a different stage of her life. And I love that she's exploring that side of herself and just trying new things, stepping out there and trying new things like we all should be doing. So especially on those dating websites, apparently there's but with that in mind, should we end on that high note of
I think we should end on that very entertaining note.
But yes, so oh my gosh, Doreen, this has been so much fun. Thank you for putting up with our X-ratedness there at the end. I'm sure that you get a lot. I'm sure that you hear it all. I'm sure that's nothing. I know.
I learned so much, and I want to have you back and learn more. Like, I feel like we did not even get into half of the things we wanted to talk about. So
I know.
I would
need to do a part 2.
Honored to come back.
Well, keep writing those books. I mean, every single one of them, I was like, oh, that one I need, that one I need, that one I need. Yeah. So yes. You have a dedicated automatic purchase for anything that you write in the future from us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
much.
much.
Well, thank you so much. And yet we'll have links to your website and some of the meditations and stuff in the show notes. And
absolutely.
So looking forward for more people getting to know you as well, because Oh, especially as we are, I always say relaunching, but because we talk about careers a lot, but
Right.
We
restarting
are kind
our
of.
lives. And yeah, it means so much in so many different levels. So highly recommend Restart for all of y'all.
Yes.
Because eventually, it might as well start now. So we're prepared. You're in
Well,
the right
yeah, I was
mindset
gonna
for
say,
when they say go. Yeah, you can't start
I'm not
early
really
enough.
waiting for some magic pandemic end anymore
No,
because that's not happening the way we initially envisioned it happening. So
yeah,
now we'll just get out there, restart in
yeah.
this, whatever this is.
Preheat your restart is what we're going to do.
I like it. That may
Yes.
be our
Oh,
episode
that's
title.
really good.
All right. Well, so nice meeting you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so
Yay,
much.
thank
This was
you.
such a fun. It's so nice to just get to be casual and just thank you. Not have to like be
Yes.
super doctory. I just appreciate it. Thank you.
We are
That is
all
not
about
CNN for
casual.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, well, this is so much
All
fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Have a great
for
rest of the
being here.
day.
You too.
All right.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us for the Mom and podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you know someone else who could benefit from the episode, please be sure and share it with them. And while we're begging, please subscribe and rate us wherever it is you listen to podcasts. You can find links to all the things we discussed today in our show notes or over at our website, momandpodcast.com, with the A-N-D spelled out. In between shows, find us over at the socials, including our private Mom and Community Facebook group. The links to that group and all of our socials can be found at momandpodcast.com. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate you more than you know. Now go out there and make your ellipses count.